So, over the years, the Lord has really provided in many different ways, many different times in our family. My late husband, Clay, and I had significant financial struggles, particularly earlier in our marriage when we were young and didn't make very good decisions and trying to establish our independence. And then he was self-employed, and we decided to make the sacrifice of me being a stay-at-home mom with our what turned out to be 4 sons later. So we knew there'd be, some sacrifices with that. But there were times when, there wasn't enough money to pay the water bill or the electric bill or something. And like I said, trying to be independent, we didn't want to ask the parents. And there were times when I'd go to the mailbox and someone had come by and stuck an envelope with cash in it, and that happened on more than one occasion. Or maybe under the door, because we had a big gap in our door because we lived in an old neighborhood in an old house. We drove used cars, very used cars, most of the time, that broke down a lot. Fortunately, my husband could repair them most of the time, but there were times when there was nothing to be done. And people would sell us cars for very cheap. Or there were a few times when we were actually given cars. The Lord would just put it on someone's heart to give us one of their cars. So he was very faithful through all that. And over the years, our faith grew in our dependence on the Lord for provision. But one of the things that stands out the most, before I get to that, another thing that would happen, we were in a really tight-knit church community. And there were times that I knew we didn't have enough groceries to last, the rest of the week. So we'd be praying, and a family would call us, and sometimes it wasn't a family. It might have been, we had these 2 single guys call us one time, these roommates, and invite us over for dinner, just kind of spontaneously, and that helped, the groceries last for the rest of the week. But it's like, who invites a family of, 4 to 6 people just spontaneously, that had to be the Lord. So he just, like I said, many times, many ways, and it increased our faith over the years. But the time that stood out to me probably the most was we were in the inner city of Dallas in a very rundown neighborhood, rundown house, and my husband had been out of work. There were, so many things that happened. Our vehicle broke down. He couldn't get to work, so he's out there repairing it, comes in for lunch, and somebody stole his tools right out of our driveway. And at that point, so many things had happened, like just in the days following up to that we just laughed. We just laughed. It was like, okay, devil, let's see how God's going to redeem what you've done, So it was around that time that they didn't have food for dinner that night. And I wasn't worried because we'd seen him provide so many times before, but it was concerning. And I'd been praying, and then the boys, Mom, what's for dinner, in the afternoon, what's for dinner this evening? So during those years, as our kids were growing and born and stuff, we would include them in our prayers. When we prayed for God's provision, we included them. And it was it was kind of a precarious thing, because you want your children to learn that God provides, but you don't want them to be afraid that, He's not going to provide, or that they're not going to have what they need. But I feel like we did a pretty good job of that. They've kind of told us we did. So that afternoon, when they asked what was for dinner, I was honest. I said, I don't know, guys, because quite have enough in the pantry, to cook anything. So y'all come on in here and let's pray. And so we prayed and asked the Lord to provide. And now, don't get me wrong. If nothing had happened, sure, we would have gone to one of our parents. We're not going to let our kids go hungry. Just want to say that. But we never had to really do that, So our next door neighbor, she was this older woman on disability, had 2 adult children who were also disabled. So they were on government assistance, and they got every month, I don't know if y'all remember, back in the 80s, some of you may have had friends or neighbors that had it, but the government would give out these surplus food boxes to people who were in need. And so that family every month would get this box, and it had, flour, cereal, cheese, peanut butter, different things in it. That day, the neighbor came over, knocked on the door, and had this box, and she said, would y'all want to eat this stuff? I mean, this is stuff we're not going to eat. We took out what we want. Do y'all want this? And I'm like, sure, I took it, and I'm like, oh, goodness, what's in here? Well, there was this can of Pilchard. Anybody know what Pilchard is? I didn't know what Pilchard was. It's fish. So it was this big can of fish, kind of like a can of mackerel, or not as nice as salmon, but it was fish. So I'm like, okay. And there were some crackers or cornmeal, I think. Anyway, enough for me to make Pilchard patties. But I told the kids, we're having salmon patties for dinner tonight. And that's what we did. We did that. The Lord provided for us through a neighbor who had less than we did. So it was very humbling, but at the same time, I'm like, how good is the Lord to not only provide for us, but to, I don't know, maybe boost that family's spirit by them not having much of anything, but yet they were able to give and provide a meal for another family. So I was always grateful for that. So my eldest son, Jeff, and I were kind of reminiscing about this the other night when I told him I was going to speak. And he said, Mom, that the way y'all handled over the years, he said, it really boosted my faith. And he told me a story of when he was a young teenager and he needed something for school and he knew we didn't have the money. He didn't come to us. He went straight to the Lord and asked him for it, and the Lord provided it. So my 15-year-old granddaughter Emma is sitting there listening to us and hearing these stories of how God provided. And so she's also learning that. And it reminded me of Psalm 145. I'm going to read part of that. We clung to this verse a lot. It says, I will extol thee, my God and King. I will bless thy name forever and ever. Every day I will bless thee, and I will praise thy name forever and ever. Great is the Lord, and highly to be praised, and his greatness is unsearchable. One generation shall praise thy works to another, and declare thy mighty acts. On the glorious splendor of thy majesty and on thy wonderful works I will meditate. And men shall speak of the power of thine awesome acts, and I will tell of thy greatness. They shall eagerly utter the memory of your abundant goodness, and shall shout joyfully of thy righteousness. It goes on and on. So that was kind of our MO. We wanted our kids, and now my kids are telling their kids about God's provision. So if any of you need prayer for God's provision, I would love to pray for you later, pray with you. So come grab me. Thanks.